Hello, in this lecture we will continue on our comprehensive problem, and we will now be preparing our financial statements, our balance sheet, our income statement, our statement of owner's equity from the adjusted trial balance. Quick recap of what we have done so far and where we are at. We had first started off putting in the journal entries, so we did the journal entries for the month. This is the activity for the month that we put into journals such as this. We posted to the general ledger. We created a trial balance from that. We then went to the adjusting process and we took that unadjusted trial balance from the accounting department, used our worksheet to create our adjustments that need to be adjusted as of the end of the time period, in this case being April, and then we came up with our adjusted trial balance. So these numbers theoretically are correct as of that point in time for an accrual basis, and we can then use those numbers then to create our financial statements. So going to our tab that we are currently on, financial statements, you'll note that we have the adjusted trial balance that we are starting with. I moved it down a little bit so it'll line up with our statements a little bit better as we go, hopefully. That's the plan at least. And then we can see that we have our trial balance. If we look at the formula, we're just pulling this trial balance from the adjusting entries. So these are the same numbers we left off with last time. Our trial balance should be adjusted and therefore on an accrual basis as of 4/30. Which is the date that we will be making the financial statements from. Main thing I want to point out when we create the financial statements is that we want to see that it's in balance and that all we're doing is changing the format. And in changing the format, just like if you're looking at algebra, it has to work. It's just a matter of changing the format. So you want to go into the puzzle thinking it has to work, not that it doesn't work. And then if something is wrong, we can have the confidence of saying, oh, okay, we just got to go back and see what went wrong, rather than thinking that there's something inherently wrong in the system. So how do we know what's in balance? Well, the debits, these are debit, 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 minus the credit, 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 plus the debit, minus credit, plus the debit, adds up to 0. So the debits and the credits are equal, indicated by this 0 here. That's one way to say that we are in balance. Other way to say, well, the assets are the green numbers and the liabilities are the orange numbers. The equity, blue numbers, assets equal liabilities plus equity. Same thing, same balancing type of concept. We are now going to take our debit and credit type numbers and convert them into more of a plus and minus type formula. But of course, we're going to break it out in more detail than just the accounting equation. We will use the balance sheet, the income statement, the statement of owner's equity. Now I'm going to start off with the balance sheet, which because I like to see that the balance sheet is everything. The balance sheet is the accounting equation. We can put all of these numbers represented in some way in the balance sheet and then break out the income statement and the statement of owner's equity. So I like to show that first, and that's why we'll start off with the balance sheet. I have made the balance sheet in accordance with our color scheme, and I know that some individuals that might drive us crazy are probably saying, you know, you're going a little overboard with the color scheme, but obviously in real life we might not do a color scheme, but everything in academia that I have learned says that color is often good. So we're going to stick with it. Assets are going to be green, we're going to have the liabilities in orange, and then the equity section will be blue on our balance here. If you wanted to get rid of the color scheme and just do this in black and white, no problem, you can do that as well, but we'll show the colors in this format as we go. Alright, so the balance sheet, we're going to start off and first just label the balance sheet, and we will label it here, April 30th, 2000X1. Now notice there's just one date, one point in time, and you might be thinking, well, you know, we're talking about the beginning of April to the end of April. Why do we just have one date on the balance sheet? Because the balance sheet is as of a point in time. It doesn't matter what the time frame is for the balance sheet. That's where we stand as of a point in time. We will talk about how we performed over that time period on the timing sheets, being the income statement and the statement of equity. First thing we'll have on the balance sheet will be assets, and we're going to start to break those assets down. The first major category of assets we will have are called current assets. These are assets that are more liquid type assets. They include cash, receivable, inventory, our new account will be in there, office supplies, prepaid insurance, equipment, no, not equipment, that's not current. So we're going to stop it right here in the green accounts. I'm just going to go ahead and copy those. I'm just going to copy all those. We're going to put that over here under the current assets. I'm going to right click. I'm going to paste it 1, 2, 3. And we do need to paste just the values. That'll keep kind of the green cells there, which is, so we got that. And note that these are all going to be current assets, and we want to start to understand the formatting of the financial statements. So we're going to represent the financial statements as a group of current assets by having this colon here. Then we could indent these. So one way to indent these is we could highlight these, go to the Home tab, go to the alignment group, and then we have this increase indent button. So I'm going to use this a lot. If you don't format it exactly the same, that's okay, but just realize that understanding the formatting can help in both creating as well as reading the financial statements. So I'm going to indent that one time like so, and then we'll put the numbers in there. I'm going to do that with formulas. We're going to put the number in the enter column of these two, H and I. These do not stand for debits and credits. There are no debits and credits on the financial statements. This just means that we're going to subtotal it on the enter column, and then we'll sum them up in the outer column. So I'm going to do this with a formula. I highly recommend using formulas because that'll help you determine if we have done everything we need to do. So I'm going to say cash equals this number, enter. Receivables equals this number. We're just pulling these same numbers into a different format. The merchandise equals this number, and the supplies equals this number, and the prepaid insurance equals this number. Now, of course, you might be saying, well, you could have copied and pasted it over there. Isn't there a faster way to do that and still use formulas? There is. So you could, if we delete these and we use the autofill, notice that we're referencing this number. I'm going to hit Control Enter and be on the same cell. We could put our cursor on the fill handle. And if we put our cursor on the fill handle and autofill, auto drives it down, Dr. Phil does the calculations, we got that in there. Note that all it did was pull down the exact formula, and by doing so, then we can ask ourselves, hey, did we find a home for this? And we could just say, yeah, that went there, and that went there, and that went there, and that went there, and that will help us if we're not in balance. So every once in a while, sometimes people make mistakes. And then we're going to highlight these. And I'm going to go ahead and highlight them and say I found a home for these, and I'm going to make them a different color. I'll make them green, not because they're assets, but just to say that we found a home for those, and we're good on that. Then we're going to have a total down here that we're going to be total current assets. And I'm going to go back on here. I'm going to increase the indent. I can't be in the cell. Notice if I'm in the cell, I can't increase the indent. If I hit Control Enter, then I'll be on the cell and not go down to the next cell when we hit Enter. I can go to the Home tab, go to the Alignment group, then increase the indent. I'm going to do it 2 times this time. So increase 2 times. Then we'll go into the outer column, and we can then sum this column up using our sum function equals SUM, and sum up these numbers here, and enter. So there we have that. Obviously, all we did was add these up. We can see it here. It adds up in the taskbar down here. We can check if they're correct by adding these up and say, yep, that's the same number. If we want an underline here, we could do so by going to the Home tab font and use this underline, and it'll actually put in a nice little green underline. Obviously, little different ways that we can underline depending on the formatting and the borders of the financials that we will be using. Okay, so then we're going to break out the second piece, the second part of our assets, because we got these 2 assets left because those are 2 green accounts. And that will be called a property, plant, and equipment. We're going to have a colon on that one as well. If I misspell anything, forgive me on that. I would generally go through a proofing process after this, but we got the property, plant, and equipment here. And that's going to contain our last 2 accounts that are still in the green area. They're going to be long-term type accounts because equipment is not liquid, in that we can't pay our bills with equipment. We can't pay our bills with the forklift. Although we like the forklift, it's helping us out. Can't really pay the bills with it. So that's why it's not a current asset. Generally, it's not as liquid of an asset. So I'm going to go ahead and copy those 2 accounts. I'm going to put that right underneath. Right click and paste it 1, 2, 3. And then once again, I'm going to indent on that. So I'm going to highlight these 2 accounts. We're going to go up to the Home tab. We're going to go to the Alignment group, and we are going to increase the indentation. All right, now note that the second account here is a Contra account. It's got a negative balance in it, or it's got a credit in it. We do not represent credits on the financial statements. What we do see here is that since most assets are debit balances, and that is a credit and it's an asset, we call that a Contra asset, and it's actually reducing the asset balance. So the book value of the equipment is the 70 debit, 7250, minus the credit, 46,550. Taskbar shows us the book value, 23,700. I'm going to represent that subtraction problem not with a negative number in our financials. I have learned or like to represent that with words. So we're going to say less and show our reader, hey, this is a subtraction problem. Not going to show the reader it's a subtraction problem with a minus sign. We're going to show the reader it's a subtraction problem by the word less. So then we're going to have this equals the 70,250. I'm going to bring that to the inner column. I'm going to bring, now notice I have some overlap here. That's okay. I could still put a formula in here and it'll just write over that part of the cell, and then we should determine if we want to adjust the settings and make this cell larger and all that kind of stuff, but we'll talk about that later. Now note that if I said equals and point to this cell 46,550 and enter, it gives me a bracket, which Excel sees as a negative number. It's possible to keep that, but I'd rather say to my reader, hey, it's negative by showing less and keep all of our numbers positive. So the way to flip the sign then on anything, we know that if we flip the sign, we could say multiply times -1. That will flip the sign. But we could do that a little bit faster. Instead of doing that, I'm going to get rid of the -1. We could just put a negative in front of it. So we could just say negative of whatever's in cell E16. That will flip the sign. So take that cell, flip the sign. If we want to do that a little bit faster, we can put our cursor on that cell. Instead of selecting equal, I'm going to select minus or negative. Excel still sees that as a formula type entry, then point to that number and enter. So bottom line, we want that number to be positive and then show that it's going to be a subtraction problem with words. So then we'll total this up. I'm going to go ahead and copy this. I'm going to paste it 1, 2, 3 so we don't have to retype it. We're going to go to the end of it. I don't want the colon there. I'm going to go off it, back on it. So I'm not on the cell. I'm not in the cell, I'm on the cell, then Home tab, alignment, increase, indent 2 times. So we have a colon showing that we have a subcategory. We pulled them into the inside. Then we're pulling the total out to the outside. We'll put the total over here. We can't use the sum function in this case because this is a subtraction problem. So we're going to say equals the 70,250, just point to it, minus the 46,550 and enter. So it comes out to the 23,700. We can see if I highlight those two, 23,700, that's correct. I'm going to go ahead and say we found a home for that. Going to make that green over here. Those are all the assets. Therefore, we can just sum up the total assets on the bottom at this time. Note that we're not going to jump around typically from column to column and add up things in different columns on financial statements. So this one's just going to add up the outer column, which would make sense because it's total current assets plus total property, plant, and equipment. So we're going to sum that up equals SUM and sum this up and enter. I should probably call this total. There we go. All right, and so if we can double check that number, I can highlight over here and say this plus this plus this plus this plus this minus the credit equals the 381. So that ties out. Looks like we did it correctly. And so we're going to go over here to the current liabilities now. Now we're on the liabilities side and we only have 3 liabilities over here. But 2 of those I'm going to assume are current, and I'm going to assume the note payable is not current. We didn't give you a whole lot of detail to determine that, but note payable could be current or non-current depending on when it is due. Current meaning it's due within a year. Long-term meaning it's going to be due later than a year. Why is that important? Because if it's due within a year, hopefully we have enough cash at the time that it's due to pay it. So we want to break out the current from the non-current so that we can compare the current liabilities and the current assets, and more specifically the cash probably and the receivables, to see if we'll have enough money to pay the stuff coming due within the year. So I'm going to copy these 2 and say these 2 are current. Copy that. And we're going to paste that over here in J5, right click and paste it 1, 2, 3. Then once again, I'm going to indent that. So it's a subcategory indicated by the colon. Then we can go to the Home tab, alignment, increase, indentation. Then we're going to have total current assets. So I'm going to try to just copy this down here. I'm going to paste that underneath, paste it 1, 2, 3. I'm going to increase the indent 2 times. So indent 2 times. Then I'm going to add the word, I'm going to double click in here, add the word total. I'm going to make this lowercase and I'm going to get rid of the colon. All right, then we got to put our numbers in here.